This is your City of Fairhope Development Review Committee, DRC meeting. Today is April 8th, 2019, and we'll begin by reviewing these are pending development applications that are coming before staff that will eventually find their way to the Planning Commission and or the City Council. We'll begin with case number SD 19.18. This is public hearing to consider a request of Joseph and Glenda Gravely for a plat approval of re-subdivision of Lot 4 Bay Echo subdivision, which is a 3-lot minor subdivision. Mr. Larry Smith is the engineer of record. He couldn't be with us here today, so what I'll do is just note very briefly that this was an item considered by the Planning Commission at its most recent meeting and was tabled. So we are working at the staff level to resolve the issues in that case and consider at a future Planning Commission meeting. So we'll move on to case number SD 19.19. This is a public hearing to consider the request of the Martinet Family Trust for plat approval of the Martinet subdivision, which is a 2-lot minor subdivision. Property located on the south side of the intersection of Caines Lane and Laraway Lane. And we won't read the long property identification number. The planner of record is Ms. Nancy Milford. We'll turn it over to Nancy.
All right, the applicant is not here today, but this was on last month's agenda. It was held over because of issue with an application check and also for advertising for a waiver for sidewalks in this particular location. There are some constraints. There are no existing sidewalks in this location, and it's located right on a curve. We've talked with Public Works. They are comfortable with the waiver request, and so it will be on this month's agenda.
Okay. Any other comments from staff? Any questions from staff about case number 19.19? Okay, moving on. So Mr. Jeffrey's case, ZC 19.07, is to be held over.
That's correct. ZC 19.07, it's going to be a request to rezone a piece of property from RA to a PUD. It's located just south of Bay Meadows Avenue, adjacent to Highway 181. We're lacking some information needed to complete the review, so it's going to give them some time to get their narrative and things in order and turned in, and we'll be held over until next month's meeting.
Okay, so ZC 19.07 will be a holdover to a future meeting. Next, we have case number SD 19.21. This is a public hearing to consider the request of 10 North Section LLC for approval of a boutique hotel, which is a 13-unit multiple occupancy project. So this is a multiple occupancy project, an MOP. Project is located at the northeast corner of the intersection of Section Street and Fairhope Avenue at the address 10 North Section Street. Mr. Larry Smith is the engineer of record for the project. However, Mr. Smith couldn't be with us here today. But Mr. Clay Adams with Walcott Adams Vernell is the architect of record, and we'll invite him to come to the front table and ask questions of staff. We've conducted our multiple occupancy project review. We've also conducted a site plan review. And so, Mr. Adams, you're welcome to come to the table and ask questions of staff.
Morning, everyone.
And Clay, speak into the mic. Yes, sir. So that way we can get a good, clear recording. So, Clay, obviously we have both an MOP and a site plan review. And I think for convenience sake, I don't think there's any harm about us discussing both the MOP and the site plan review concurrently, because the very next case is SR 19.01. Clay, you probably saw from Larry Smith, I sent the site plan review comments on Wednesday of last week. I did not finish the MOP comments until over the weekend. However, what I tried to do is replicate in general the comments from the MOP in the site plan review, and then in the MOP version basically just assigned chapter and verse to the various issues. So what we can do is just turn it over to you, and we can go through the list if you'd like. Fire away with questions for staff.
Okay, and on the MOP, I had 2 attachments, and they differed by, was there any reason one was signed and one wasn't signed? And I printed them both this morning, and
Sure.
one was signed.
Sure.
It's one of these more accurate? One was 18 and one was 15 pages?
Clay, probably in my haste, I've been a little busy the past
Yeah,
couple
I
days.
know, yeah.
In my haste, it's probably, I will take full responsibility for not signing a document.
So there are 2 reviews of that?
I'll tell you what, let's rephrase here
Okay.
real quick. On Wednesday of last week, which I believe was the 2nd or 3rd of April, I produced the site plan review, and I put a draft watermark on the document, and I sent that to Larry Smith via email.
That's right.
Wanted to have the design professionals to have that as quickly as possible. Then over the weekend, I sent a signed version of both the MOP and the site plan review, sent them both out under separate correspondence, and those are signed by me.
Okay. I opened both documents, and I have 2 different MOPs. So
Okay.
so I might not have gotten this new site plan review.
Sure.
I in fact have 2 different MOPs, one signed and one not.
Okay, well, Clay, what I'll tell you this is very simply, and again, I apologize. Trying to get the details out to the applicant as quickly as possible.
Yes.
The document for the site plan review, if it changed between the draft and the final version, was infinitesimal.
Yes,
in
and most
its
of
changes.
this is similar anyway.
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
thank
So,
you. Yep.
So sorry about that.
No, that's
sorry
all right.
for taking
Yep.
time with that. We
No,
want to
and,
make sure we
and
were
this
clear
is
on
our
that.
first loop, and Larry handles this a lot of times, but did want to ask a few questions.
Sure.
Yep, if you can, starting with the site plan review.
Okay.
The bicycle parking, just in general, again, Larry designs most of our projects that have parking lot sidewalks and utilities, and we turn that over to him. I wasn't aware that buildings needed that. Is that a must for our project? And if so, we could certainly figure out how to incorporate it, but that's a general question for whomever.
What I'd say there, Clay, is that is, and we're talking about Article 2, Section
I'm sorry,
C2D1,
yes, right.
which is this is straight out of the site plan review criteria that's in the zoning ordinance. So what I cited exactly how they have it worded. I think the main thing is that as long as the development shows that it complied with that requirement, because that is a comprehensive plan requirement, as long as we show that that is accommodated, you'll have compliance with the comprehensive plan.
In general, I don't see those sprinkled over the city, but that's a requirement going forward, or that's something we want. And
Like I said, Clay,
Yeah.
when I review these, I go line by line through the criteria in the zoning ordinance, and
Right.
that's one of the first criteria in the zoning ordinance for a site plan review.
how have other people maybe avoided that, or do you ask for a variance, or?
I can't answer that, Clay. I apologize. I really can't
Okay.
answer that on previous projects.
Okay. And we learned that I think our sidewalk is 7 feet plus a planter, which is a little bigger than some, but I understand the 8-foot requirement. A couple of things, we could obviously set our building off of the property line by a foot, as long as that didn't cause any other problems with zoning or setbacks. We are cutting the corner, so the first 12 feet of ours does widen out, and the rest of it is 7 feet, not the 8, and it has a planter on one side. So we can certainly abide by that also. I didn't know, walking through town looking at other projects, that's typical and enforced on all projects, so it is.
It actually is. I
Okay.
know that we've had that on multiple others where they've had to extend. Now, some, and I'm not going to speculate. I think some of them had some recessed areas back in to their
Yes,
building where they
yes.
were able to accomplish that, but it had to be anywhere you're doing a substantial improvement to a
Right.
building or to a site, then you've got to come into full compliance. So we had some folks that have had to extend
Pull that in.
from 6 and 7 feet to the 8-foot sidewalk.
Okay, and we could cantilever the second floor if we chose?
We've done that, correct, with a balcony and a hold harmless letter. Yes, we have been able to do that.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the zoning ordinance does contemplate that.
And Clay, let me ask a question just for my knowledge. On on the Fairhope Avenue side where the existing building is, are you saying that if you measure from the face of the building to the back of curb, that's only 7 feet there
Yes,
currently?
I
Okay.
scaled them both, and they were 7, you know, and then I went by the site over the weekend and looked, yes.
And Eric and Buford, from a aesthetic standpoint, you have a storefront that's coming down Fairhope. Now, if we notch it in by a foot, you're going to get a incongruent storefront. Is that, I mean, now granted, on the section side, there's no reason they can't meet the 8. But what I'm saying is that if they were going to follow the same building facade that's already there.
Yeah, I mean, and it's my understanding, and it is a zoning requirement, but my understanding is it shall come into compliance. Now, if that's something that during the site plan review that the applicant wants to discuss
Relief
during the
from,
planning
okay.
commission review, then I would think that's something they could at least bring up.
Okay,
Yes.
fair enough, okay.
And gentlemen, it doesn't jump off the page, but the zoning ordinance in this section does contemplate, it does provide a means of relief for that within the writing, the way that this section is written, that the applicant can request that and basically make their case for doing that. So certainly if there's an aesthetic feature or something there, it's not totally rigid, so there is a means of requesting that. And I think I didn't go into great detail, but I pointed that out in my comment. There is a means of requesting that.
I will say that we've been very consistent about applying that,
Okay.
just so
Yeah,
you're
I agree.
aware of that.
Yeah.
And that's what we're here today, just to understand each one, and hopefully I won't go through every one, but, yeah. The method of describing all the protection and all the comments about the construction, we've done some 34 buildings downtown, and lately they've become more critical, obviously, the more we grow. And we've managed to accomplish that. A description of how that, you know, it's generally might be written in detail in our final specifications for each contractor that's bidding it to understand that, and a description of that will suffice.
It will, and I know typically we deal with construction questions at the time of permitting. I just, in kind of looking at this and this site, I think it would probably be to our benefit to kind of discuss some of those, because this is a little unique. We've had a lot of work go on downtown. I don't know of any other sites as compact and landlocked on all sides as this one is. You know, I've just, first off, what is your proposed construction type? What are y'all going to do?
We're not there, but it may be thin concrete structure to maximize our floors, with, you know, because
Like a type 3 or type 2?
Yeah, yes.
Like a
yes,
type 2?
that's
Okay.
right.
So there's going to be concrete and steel involved. And
Yes.
like my concerns, you know, when I look at this project, I think my initial impression is the lion's share of the work is probably going to have to be done at night, because we can't set up cranes in the middle of Fairhope Avenue or Section Street to erect steel during the day. We can't, you know, set up pumper trucks to pump concrete in the middle of the day. I mean, that's our busiest intersection, both traffic downtown, both traffic and pedestrian. And, you know, and just as an example, the building that the Moores are doing across the street here.
Right.
You know, they set up 3 a.m. concrete pours, and we've had others that have done the same thing. They block half that traffic, half that lane, do their pump, get it done, get it out of there, and they're done by 7. Right. But they've also got access off that alley on behind them. That's the issue that you have specifically, is you really don't have access on any of the other, you know, sides of this building. So the other concern I had was about material laydown. I know when Mr. Buffet built the theater building downtown, there were several times we had to go out there and we ran off, you know, delivery trucks delivering block and drywall and this, because they were coming out in the middle of the day blocking traffic up and down Section Street. So, you know, you're talking about material deliveries, locations for pumps and steel and, you know, cranes. that's just that, and especially at that intersection where you really don't, do you guys have an idea of where you may have a material laydown area?
Well, I think you'd have to stage it on the footprint, yes. But,
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, that's what a contractor does. We'll do a thorough description so that
Sure.
every contractor will understand he has to work at night and
Okay.
has to meet
And
that.
if that's the
Right.
case, then yeah, I mean, if most of the most intrusive work is being done at night, that will solve a lot of those problems. And especially around there, you've got the Hampton Inn, but in terms of full-time residents that live in that part, there's really not a lot there.
Right.
So we typically, if someone's pumping at night, we'll ask them to put door hangers or notifications on the residences so that folks know what's going on, and then we let police department know.
Right.
But yeah, just kind of keep that in mind, just because of
Yes.
the unique location and the size constraints, that there's probably going to be a lot of this that we're going to require to be done at night.
Right.
And
we
Clay, I'll say the one thing, just what, a nice executive summary narrative about how you envision as the
Right.
designer, the means and methods of construction will take place would be very helpful.
Yes.
Because understand, Eric understands how things are built, and we do, but you're eventually going to have a site plan for the city council, and having a succinct narrative explaining how you protect pedestrian ways during construction, that certain critical activities will be done at times when there's not traffic and things like that will be very helpful.
Yes.
Because, that's going to be a question. How are you going to build it in a way that doesn't disrupt the center of downtown Fairhope? So.
Absolutely. And Clay, that's what we're, in terms of the site plan review, like Richard was saying, we've got to be able to put this on the screen in front of the planning commission and the city council. And so to be able to give them assurance that, that at the very beginning, all of these issues have been considered and addressed, and there's a means and methods with dealing with them. And I would also throw in there, any supporting drawings that can back up that narrative that we can have in the form of slides to put on the screens will be extremely helpful. So that's what we're really looking for to have in the site plan review when we go before the planning commission and the council.
Okay, and the last one, we would certainly be using a group of qualified contractors. Yes, it wouldn't be.
Absolutely.
Everyone could not handle that project, right?
Some better than others.
Our particular site lighting is shown on the renderings, but we don't see a bunch of harsh exterior lighting, some quaint, maybe even gas lanterns and things like
Okay.
that. And we'll respond to those. And
Yeah.
then,
Otherwise, the existing lighting in the right-of-way.
yes.
There's no requirement by the developer to enhance or modify that, but you'll have some additional building lighting.
Right.
Okay.
And then we understand the electrical and the gas are all complicated issues, and
Yes, sir.
Larry needs to do some follow-up with those two departments to
Right.
understand, and we will be, and again, that's a bit of a cost of development of that site. It just is, yes. And,
Yes, sir. And so, Clay, what I would ask there is that, so you're aware, of course, Mr. Larry Smith is aware of this as well, as we have Mike Allison, who's electrical superintendent here today. And Mike, jump in here if you need to make a comment, but essentially bringing power to the site is going to be a bit of a challenge. And so from an MOP standpoint, that's where we really need the hard drawings to reflect that. So it's possible the MOP could be continued or tabled, but we could possibly press on with the site plan review if the issues we talked about in the site plan review are addressed. So keep that in mind as well.
And Clay, I'll kind of jump in and start off the conversation. We've had this is a public works / public utilities, discussion of how do we accomplish this. We know that there is identified on Fairhope Avenue a utility garage, closet, whatever you want to.
Right.
That has a lot of purposes and use. One is my concern is how do we provide solid waste service for this development, especially not knowing the end user on the retail or commercial side downstairs, because different users produce different levels of solid waste. So one, that utility space has to have enough room to service the required number of containers based upon the ultimate end user. Then we have the challenge of gas, which was, I understand, and Jeremy, you can jump in. There is not service on that section of Fairhope or Section Street. The closest service is the alley behind the Welcome Center, and unfortunately, there's a building that you don't control, or neither do we, between you and gas. And there has been times when we have put lines over a top of a building to get to another, but that would require an easement on your behalf to accomplish that. And then how, if that gas is brought in the building, how much space does it need in that utility space to be safe and proper? And then electrical comes into play, because if it's going to be an above-mounted transformer, it has to have clearances of 3 feet on 3 sides and 10 feet on one, which makes that closet 16 feet wide and about 9 feet deep just for the electrical.
Just for the transformer.
Not including sanitation, gas, water, which water is not here. Oh, water is here. Excuse me, Richard, you can speak for water.
That's right.
So that was a concern here, is that the concern is that it appears that we may have a 5-pound tube that we're trying to put 10 pounds of sausage in. And that is, it's not that it can't be done. And Mike introduced the concept of a vaulted transformer in the sidewalk, which from a public works standpoint, I'm not a real fan of, because we've got pretty little pavers out there, and a vault's going to have a cabinet top on it that's going to be similar to the rest of the surface of the sidewalk. But the right-of-way is, the purpose of the right-of-way is to support utilities, so if that's the only mechanism to do that. But I think Mr. Allison informed me that that option was exceedingly more expensive than a traditional pad-mounted transformer. So that's kind of where we're all thinking. There's a lot of, and you and your design team has got to tell us how that's going to work.
And some of the information, I mean, I know you guys are still in the planning stages, but what kind of loads are on the building, because that's really going to help determine what kind of transformer you need, how big of a transformer is going to go on the site. So just some rough estimates. And, like Mr. Johnson said, there's a couple different options. Submersible transformers are considerably more expensive, and we'd probably require you to buy 2, so we'd have a spare. Because if it failed, it's probably a 12-week lead time, so you don't want your building out of power for 12 weeks while we're waiting for a transformer.
Not at all. Not at all. Mike, what would the lid of that vault look like? Would that be
It can be concrete.
So it can be concrete?
Or metal.
Okay.
If it's in the sidewalk, it's a little bit easier. If it's in the street, then you need drive-over ratings, things like that. But if it's in the sidewalk, you can do a concrete lid.
And I was curious, because if we had the nice Fairhope style pavers, and then you have a piece of diamond tread aluminum in the sidewalk, that's
one of the options, diamond tread. But you can do them with concrete. You just end up with lifting holes that you have to leave free to pull the lids off, that kind of stuff.
And Clay, just looking at the site real quickly, following up on what Mr. Johnson was saying about solid waste, it appears there's a mixture of waste services for the existing buildings there. There's probably about a half dozen or a dozen rollout carts for some of the waste disposal, but then there's also a front load, a commercial front load dumpster for one of the businesses back there as well. So you have kind of a mishmash of service. I think my last question, Clay, is do we know if there are any underground storage tanks left over from the former fuel station Gaston Ford dealership? Do we know anything about that? Were they removed? Were they remediated? Were they properly abandoned? Do we have any data on that at all?
Okay, let me go back and to the first questions.
I'm sorry, Clay. Take your time.
Yep, I got some notes. If you do a ground vault, could it be on our property, and what are the clearances for those? Are those still 3, 3, and 10? It doesn't seem like it could be, but.
If you're in a submersible vault, your clearances change.
Right.
You can almost go to, because everything's on top.
Yes.
So the clearances are more for cooling and for operation, for safe operation of the transformer. But if you put everything in a vault, then you oversize the vault a little bit more.
Right.
For the cooling, but all the operations on top. So you have to be able to pull the lid off. You either get a bucket truck in to lift the transformer out, or work it safely from the top. I didn't see, you're almost going lot line to lot line. So I don't know if there's room.
Well, I was just thinking about in that indentation.
I wouldn't put it in a driveway like that.
You would not?
No, because then you're getting to it could be an issue, and the lid is not rated for continuous. We'd have to look at the lids. I'm gonna say it wouldn't be my first choice, but let me look at it.
It just seems easier to stay off the city, and we don't have heavy traffic on it.
Right, I'm more worried about getting into it to lift the lids off of it, lift the transformer out if it ever fails.
Right.
So we'd have to be able to get a crane in there to lift.
Do you know how much those transformers weigh?
Again, I need the size of
Yeah.
the load of the building to be able to look at the transformers. I don't even know how big of a transformer it is.
Yeah, I don't either. A 9,000 square foot building, you know, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. The second one was the waste, before we get to the tanks. We are designing that space, and it's taking away from the tenant space, and it'll be as big as it needs to be with gas meters and electrical panels and clearances and all those. It's the chicken and the egg. We don't know anything yet. We're in the early design stages, but the neat thing is that is a hotel lobby and a tenant space, and when we finish designing, it's going to grow to hold all those, and we're going to show that we're going to label some of those and increase it for this meeting, so we'll show that we're trying to respond to all these items, and we see it being in the form of the carts, and rolling them out of there and having it nicely screened. I own a building several buildings downtown, and other people's trash are in our alley, and they're not nice and they're not screened. I know I talked to Eric about it, and I understand that problem firsthand. So we want it to look very nice, and we're going to do that. On the tanks, I've asked Matt twice, and told him that it appeared we might need to substantiate that for y'all. That would be the best way to handle it, right? So on any tanks, and if he had a phase one or whatever to handle that. That's on the site plan review. Aren't most of I like you said, I printed this out at 8 and went through it, but most of it is very similar
Yes.
to this.
Yes.
So I don't think we'll walk through any of those, but
Sure.
if I had something, I might just follow up by email. I
You
think
are-
they're very similar. aren't
You're
they?
welcome to, Clay, and,
Yep.
and I went through that very quickly when we started. Essentially, what I've done is everything in the site plan review, where it lies chapter and verse within the subdivision regulations is noted in the MOP. So what you'll notice is the site plan review is derived from the zoning ordinance, whereas an MOP is derived from the subdivision regulations. That's where you get into your engineering, your technical review, that sort of thing. So everything should be replicated, but you're welcome to follow up.
And the good news is, being in the central business district, you have no ingress, no egress, no requirement for drainage, no requirement for parking, so Public Works has no comment, so.
Absolutely. So Clay, the MOP, your MOP checklist was 15 pages long. A typical MOP is about 40 pages long.
Oh, okay, all right. All right, well, we certainly appreciate everyone's time, and I know it's
Absolutely.
helpful and beneficial, especially at our meeting, and we'll plan to have our response by next Monday, I think. What time is that due?
Close of business.
Okay.
Close of business. So any further questions from staff before we let Clay go?
I just love to sit down. I think Jeremy would too with the engineer, so we can talk about some of that.
Okay.
In the room that y'all are designing, is this going to be completely enclosed with just a door that opens up where you can roll the, as far as the concern with the gas, if we ever have a gas leak and the gas cannot escape safely into the atmosphere and everything's in one little corner
Right.
underneath.
Dangerous.
Right.
Yep. I saw it as louvered, open, screened. It could even float so that it had no, when you walk by it, you couldn't see in it. No lock on that door, and it's on an ingress, not enclosed, not behind an owner door. So, I don't know how we do a gas meter other than an indentation, and nobody aesthetically would want that sitting on the sidewalk. So, maybe first thing inside the door, a floating non-panel at the 6-foot level, screened, louvered where the air does move, and you don't see it. And the city knows that all those utilities are inside there, and it's never locked. Would that sound like a plan?
I guess it's going to depend what the drawing looks like. Once all this is drawn out and we can actually look at it and make a determination at that point on what y'all design as far as how that room, how much free air is going to be able to get into that building or the
Space.
space.
Any other landlocked buildings, a gas meter isn't on the front sidewalk. True, I mean, they're not on roofs, are they?
Yeah, I can't think of any off the top of my head, but then again, see, the other thing that it kind of made me think of is also make sure in your room you have room for your sprinkler backflow.
Yes.
Yes.
And that's why that room is under.
Yeah.
And it won't even be, chances are we don't have our tenant or build that wall and, until
Right.
construction drawings are done and everything is accounted for in construction review or permitting. All those things will be with their clear, you know how we draw drawings.
Sure.
The power meter will have its clearance as a hatched area and,
Yep.
all those other pieces.
Yeah,
And
it's just-
until we're finished, that room has not been.
It hadn't been designed, and it's just, there's just going to be a lot of stuff in there.
There is.
There's going to be a lot of stuff there.
Yes.
But that's okay. That's what they're there for.
Other buildings, mine, others, put it in alleys and other places. It'd be better if it's well-designed and controlled, I think. It'd be a better solution, not to the owner perhaps from being able to lease space, but it's nice to have all that. I know we know whose meter is that and whose is that, because again, I own several buildings. It's not always straightforward in an alleyway, so I think.
Well, I'll
it
tell you
could
what,
be
Clay,
better.
we're welcome. You're certainly welcome. You and Larry Smith, welcome to have a follow-up meeting with staff. And you're welcome to reach out to Mike Allison directly. And also Jeremy Little. Jeremy actually performs, his crews perform most of the installations and actually brings the service to the building or to the development. So follow-up meeting is certainly welcome. We're happy to do that.
Okay. Thank y'all very much.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
So we'll move on to SD 19.22, public hearing, consider the request of Southland Place property owners session. This is a re-subdivision of common area 10. And Nancy, was Larry Smith couldn't be with us here today, or will this one hold over?
What they are proposing right now is to do an informal review. Staff has some concerns with regards to the precedent this particular subdivision may present. So we are asking for some legal direction on
Okay.
this, but I think that the applicant is wanting to go to Planning Commission for an informal review regarding division of the common area.
Very good, very good. So the subdivision case will carry over, but they still want to be heard via informal review. No harm there. So we'll move on to case SD 19.23. So Mr. Mike Jeffries, is that one? Are we going to discuss it today, or where are we with that case, please?
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll invite.
We had a few small issues with it, but we'll see what we can get worked out. Take this opportunity to kind of go over some ideas to see what we might possibly be able to do.
Yes, this kind of took us by surprise. It just kind of happened Friday, and Mr. Calvert did work with staff prior, with the whole family subdivision regulations, or the approvals were still in play, but now it isn't, which I understand. The 3-lot subdivision, which we approached to you Friday afternoon,
Correct.
he would like to move forward with that
Okay.
if we can this meeting and just pay the difference for that extra lot. Do y'all see a problem with that? I mean, because all 3 would be facing the front of the road, and then after the fact, then we'll try to work in breaking those others up for the family.
I think that would still be possible, because the drawing is not going to change that significantly from the drawing that you have for the 2-lot minor subdivision. It's going to be somewhat similar to that same drawing, correct?
Yeah, it'll before we had the 2 lots kind of shown right here because we expected the rest to already be exempted and created parcels. Now what it'll basically do, it'll be that entire parcel come to the back, will be lot 3.
Correct. That would
So
be.
we will have to modify the plats in which y'all have.
I'd say,
And Michael, the only problematic here is that they would need a waiver for the frontage width on the flag lot.
the frontage, the width is can be measured at the building.
That's
setback-
right.
at the
So,
building setback line.
so actually,
it
that layout could come in
is
compliant.
compliant, correct, yeah, for a 3-lot minor subdivision.
But Stuart, I will just caution you, the one problem is the concept in the aggregate, meaning that is you have a successful 3-lot minor subdivision, it gets approved, okay? And in a relatively short time, the same entity, the same owner or whatever, comes back to do a further subdivision of the larger lot. then the planning commission looks at that as an aggregate situation, and then you introduce major subdivision requirements because the total number of lots produced from the original parcel exceeds 4, okay? So just be forewarned that that's a discussion. We got into a terrible mess with one that came back years later almost they had big lots, and the big lots weren't selling, so they were going to narrow them down to 1 acre lots instead of 2 acres, and oh Lord, it was a mess. I'll just tell you. So that's the only thing I'll caution you is that it is, the development is in the aggregate, meaning that if you come back with a lot that was created by an earlier minor subdivision to do another minor, you add the 2 minors together, and then if it makes it a major, then you have those considerations at that time.
Yeah, because the question will be asked is that the remnant parcel is a flag-shaped lot. Now, that is of substantial size, so for the current request, it's not an issue, but then the question becomes, is there going to be a paved, publicly maintained street or road constructed and dedicated to the city or county to connect to the existing one? You open up all those sorts of issues, so just bear that in mind for future reference if there's a future development desired on top of the 3 lots right there. That question will come about.
There is a requirement in our reg that they state if it's going to be a phased development, they need to
Correct.
submit it as a phased development.
So that being said, if I'll discuss it with the client, and I guess maybe later today for sure we'll tell you if we want to. Is it a holdover or remove it and then reapply if we were going to try to do it because you're saying it'd be probably better if we were to develop or to divide the back side up in the family to do it all at once and explain it that way to the council.
Well, you have an active application, so certainly if the applicant wishes to hold it over, email correspondence and ask staff to hold it over, that's certainly fine.
And I think, do we allow that if all of a sudden they realize that they need to modify the application, they get credit for what they ever paid and they don't have to pay the difference? Is that a correct statement?
I think that's in general that
So you don't lose any investment
Correct.
you made, you just modify it and pay whatever the additional.
Yeah, we've definitely had that happen where during the course of review, it was determined that a minor subdivision became a major subdivision, and then we just simply, the fees were just the balance of the
what
total.
was due.
So we've had that happen a couple times in the past, and that could certainly be the same case here if necessary.
Okay.
For the question I have for the back parcel, because it's so large, instead of having a publicly maintained road, to have a private drive amongst the lots instead of, because we're not inside the city limits, of course. We're way far out.
Correct.
Just having a personal private drive, because I see it out there. We own, not just me, but different family members own different parcels of property. And even the property next door, they have like 4 houses on the same parcel of property, and they all share the same driveway. Because we, maybe be able to request a variance for just having a personal driveway, not having it publicly maintained. We own the parcel, we're still paying our taxes and everything on the parcel property. Just having a driveway to access all the land.
That would be in form of a waiver request to the planning commission from a waiver from Article 5, where it states that every lot must front upon a publicly paved maintained road. And then they look at the waiver request, staff would make a recommendation as whether we recommend to approve or deny the waiver, and then planning commission ultimately makes a decision on whether or not they will approve the waiver. If they don't approve the waiver, then the subdivision case in its entirety would be denied, because it'd be recommendation for the subdivision would be based on the conditional of the approval of the waiver, and if planning commission didn't approve the waiver, then the recommendation would end up be for denial of the actual subdivision itself.
And
So it's something that it is possible, but it's it'd be in the planning commission's hand, and if in the narrative, like we said before, if you can state a narrative, the reason for it, and it could be justified as to having it. Now, with the lot being, very wide or very narrow, but extremely deep, is, possible justification for having just a private drive. If it's going to be family land or something like that, then, you might have a, leg to stand on in front of the planning commission. But again, it's.
Are you Mr. Calvert?
Yes,
And I will tell you, call me a hypocrite or whatever, if you were inside the city limits, I would be opposed to a private drive, because as your public works director here in the city, what we have found is that when you've had a bunch of development on a little private drive over time, then they all show up at city council meetings complaining about the condition of their private drive, demanding the city do something about it, and next thing you know, I end up inheriting a non-standard road that has to then you go put gravel on it and fix whatever problems, and then they're knocking at the door, well, you need to pave my road like everybody else. So if the county, in this case, has to sign off on this, and they're in the affirmative, you're not gonna get an opposition from me. I'm gonna let y'all make the argument to the planning commission. It's outside the city limits. I don't think the chance in my career lifetime that you're going to be in the city limits, so I don't have any exposure to the public works cost of infrastructure to the city. And now that may be a hypocrisy on my part, but I'm okay with it. What's inside the city is different than what's outside the city. But again, that burden is on you to, one, get the county to sign off on it. And I think if you come into the planning commission and say the county has approved this, because they're the ones that are exposed to maintenance if somebody starts knocking on county commissioner's door to fix my driveway, not the city of Fairhope. And the other thing is you and Stuart work together to make your argument to justify the waiver, and I think the planning commission will give you a fair hearing. That's all we can say. So.
Yeah, because that's the, because the phase 2 of the subdivision, or if y'all said, to go to the 5, that's why I want to make sure that if we do the 3 lot and have to get, to do the family part, because we already have the approval from the county to do the family subdivision in the back. So that's why I asked those questions, so.
Yes, sir.
And I think that's all good information to make your case with the planning commission.
Okay.
And they recognize that there's some incongruity between the county and the city. For example, the county by law has to accept a family subdivision, but the city's rules do not say that we have to, that doesn't exist in the Code of Alabama for municipalities, which is insane,
Yeah.
since all municipalities existed within a county. So, but that's the rules we have to play by, so.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen. So next we have SD 19.24. This is a request for final plat approval for the Hamlet at Old Battles Village, and Nancy Milford's the planner of record.
Yes, this is the 5th phase of Old Battles Village, and let me just a moment. This one has some smaller lots than the rest of the development. It's geared more towards the, I guess, the aging community, small lots, small houses, smaller footprints, I guess I should say. Roughly, the lots are approximately 65 feet in width. And I've already communicated with the applicant. They have their checklist. Now, I will say we got the files a little bit late, so didn't have that much review time, but hopefully they've looked at it, and if they have any questions, they'll let me know.
And Nancy, just to check off, we've reviewed the material test reports, and we
Yes.
have seen the video on the storm sewer, so that part of Public Works is done. I was out there, I think all the signage was in, is that correct, Mr. Pumphrey?
Yes.
And I didn't see anything that gave me any concern.
Yes, we also were, the final inspection letter is ready with the exception of one department, and I'm sure they're going to get that to me pretty quick, because I know the developer is expressing some anxiousness about getting that checklist so they can get those accomplished.
I'll fess up. I'll get out there today. Sorry.
Pressure.
Hadn't had a chance. It was me. It was me. And I'm actually going to take Cody with me, and we're going to go, what we're basically checking are your sidewalk ramps and your tactile pads and connections on all that. And we'll get it done this afternoon.
I wasn't going to name
That's okay. You're very kind of you. Thank you.
So, oh, and I should have said 42 lots. That's what I did not say. Did you have any questions?
Yeah, I got one
Okay.
question on page 4, the checklist. There are 3 comments made about certificates. It says the certificates are on the
Yes.
final plat, but not on the final plans.
Yes, this is an issue with the the way the checklist is worded, because this is a final plat. Basically, all you need to do is put a copy of the final plat layout in the plans. I think I called Jason and left
Yeah,
him a message.
okay.
It's more of a tick mark kind of issue to make
But would
sure.
it make a difference if they're not on there? I don't guess I understand what the point is of the certificates.
Well, I think.
The final plat is
the
what's
reg-
recorded.
I know, it is, but the way our regulation reads, it says final plat and final plans. So the solution to that is just insert the final plat
Well, we
into
do.
your.
Well, it'll be
Yeah.
in there, but I guess
Yeah.
I didn't quite understand why it was asking for certificates to be put on something that,
Yeah,
But
I
anyway.
agree. It was just there's some things in our regs that probably could require tweaking, like the provision for recording. They don't use that anymore. They're just some
Okay.
things in the reg that probably at some point need to be updated.
And Steve, some of the engineers, I noticed some of the engineering firms are starting to basically take their plat and just make a separate cover page where there's plenty of room for all the certificates as well as the engineer certificate too. So that's certainly fine. That's certainly fine if you have a plat that's very, 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 very crowded with certificates and the actual lots and everything. There's no harm in making a cover page for it.
anything else? I'm gonna do my one issue. 39 pages for a report. I'm just gonna say it from our perspective, this is awful cumbersome. I've never dealt with any municipality, and I've even worked at the county and done reviews. I've never seen, is this driven by you guys or by the planning commission? Because I mean, it's cumbersome, guys. It's gotta be for you guys to do the reports, or maybe it's simple for you guys, but it seems like there ought to be a better way to do this where you send it out. I mean, probably 2/3 of this or more is stuff that's you're telling me is already on my plans. You're just telling me it's there instead of telling me. It seems like I should get something that just tells me what you want instead of telling me. I got to read through 40 pages of papers there to find out what's missing. If you see what I'm saying, So I'm getting most of it's telling me what I have done right, and I appreciate that. But if I did it all right, I'm still going to get 40 pages telling me that I did it all right. And I don't know, it just seems, it's just, maybe I'm the only engineering company that sees this, but our whole office, it gets frustrated with it, not for anything else. It just takes a lot of time to go through and then digest all this, pull it out, and respond to it. It just seems like there's an easier way. And it is in every other place that we deal with. I mean, a report like this, anywhere else would probably be in the max of 4 or 5 pages long. And it's 40 pages, and it's just, I don't know.
And I'm gonna answer, I've been on both sides of
I
the
know you
equation, you
have.
know that. And,
You and Wayne both.
you know, I like the checklist, but you and I, in our roles at the county, we would take that same type of checklist, and then we would just write a letter and bullet point only the things that were deficient from that checklist, instead of giving you the whole checklist that had everything that was not deficient on there too.
And nor would I have printed out the actual wording in the I mean, basically, I got almost the full subdivision regulations in this document printed out every time, because you don't just tell me chapter and verse, you actually print it out. And it even doubles up on it even more, so.
And I'll be glad to have a conversation with Wayne and them. I mean, I'm glad that we're following the checklist, because that
Oh, I
makes sure
agree.
that nothing gets,
We're
but
not
we should
discounting
only
that.
report the deficiencies from that review, okay? It doesn't need to be everything that's correct either. I agree.
And Steve, the city utilizes a software package called Munis, which is commonly used in municipal government by cities. And hopefully, the intent is to move to utilizing it for all reviews, not just building department. And so what I hope is at some point in the future, when we conduct a review, we click a button and it spits out exactly what you're talking about. We're certainly not there yet, but that is, you know, certainly my desire and anticipation if we can arrive at something like that at some point in the future. But you have to have it in a form you can use it until then.
Yeah. Not complaining at you, just an observation.
Have a great day, Steve.
Well, buy stock in paper pulp.
Thank you, guys.
Okay, almost done here. We have a utility review, UR 19.13, related to AT&T, and Miss Nancy is the planner of record for that case.
Yep, this is a utility review, basically roughly 2,700 linear feet of fiber optic cable that is going to go from Fairhope Avenue to Windmill Road. Most of those large trees are to the south of this. However, if there are some trees in the way, we do want to flag, please do your best to work around them.
Yes,
and-
please protect the trees. When the
Protect the
houses were
trees.
being built, I had numerous people bump into my office telling us they were destroying the tree roots.
Yes.
And they weren't, but that's a very sensitive area.
Okay, gotcha. We're a little bit north of the large
Yeah.
trees down there, so
Okay.
I don't think it'll be a problem.
Okay. If you have any questions about,
Okay.
I think we talked about the scope, and everyone's looked at the scope. Nobody seemed to have any issues, so I think
Okay.
we're good to go on it.
Okay.
All right, and Wade, if you can stay seated for just one moment more.
All right.
Next case, UR 19.14, AT&T Utility Review, and Mr. Mike Jeffries reviewed the case.
No, I think, have you been up there lately? We've done a lot of work up there, so your clearances should be good.
Yeah, so we have an existing aerial cable line through a lot of this, especially the stuff on Pensacola, that we're gonna overlash the fiber to.
Are you gonna move to the new structures?
Are there more than just, we did some
We're
tricks.
doing on North Mobile, and they're getting ready to go down Tensaw now.
Okay, so probably by the time we actually get this permit and built, all
Yeah.
that should be done, and then we can make
Yeah,
transfers
if you
while we're
can,
there.
if you can transfer and get off, then we can probably pull those whole poles out
Okay.
while we're there.
Okay.
But I know they're getting ready to start on Tensaw. A lot of it depends on the weather.
Okay, I'll go by there and look. I know we transferred one to a new steel pole, which is right where.
Probably right
new-
at the intersections.
Yeah, right where the new road pulled
Yeah.
off, but yeah, that's not a problem.
Yeah, because we're doing a lot of work. Those poles up there are in the middle of lots, and they're not in a straight line, so we're cleaning it up a little bit, or a bunch, and going with taller poles, so definitely have clearance for you.
Okay. And then the portion through the new Van Antwerp Park subdivision will be all directional bore. Just pretty small.
They're cutting a couple lots in there already. Yeah, I think they're getting ready to cut in 2 lots already for construction, so if you want to get through there while they're still tearing up stuff.
Yeah.
And Mr. Interim Director, if I could make a request, the next time that Mr. Mitchell has a couple of cases on it, can we put him on the front of the agenda? Because he has sat patiently in the back of the room every time we've done this.
I'm
and-
all caught up on my email. though.
Okay, well, good. And his is always buttoned up and tight and pretty easy to go, and he sits and has to listen to everybody. So maybe next time, maybe reverse the batting order and let the U's go first, okay?
So noted.
All right, thank
So
you.
noted. So, any questions for Wade? Wade, any questions for staff?
Nope.
Okay, no other comments or questions from staff? We will stand adjourned. Thank you.